I sacrificed my entire life for my daughter, working double shifts, skipping meals, wearing the same worn shoes for years so she could have better. But one overheard phone call changed everything. "I'm ashamed of her," she said, her voice dripping with disgust. "I wish she'd just disappear." So I did. I sold my $2 million house, packed a single suitcase, and vanished. No tears, no confrontation, just silence, the kind that cuts deeper than any scream ever could. My name is Margaret Walker, and at 72 years old, I thought I understood the weight of words. I'd heard plenty in my years as a community hospital nurse. Last confessions, desperate pleas, words of gratitude whispered through oxygen masks. But nothing prepared me for the words that would end my life as I knew it. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October. The air had that crisp quality that made me think of apple cider and the wool sweaters I'd knitted for Claire when she was small. I'd left the hospital early, something I rarely did, because I'd scored a beautiful cut of salmon at the market. Claire loved my honey-glazed salmon, or at least she used to, these days. I couldn't be sure what she loved anymore. The brown paper bag crinkled against my hip as I climbed the 3 steps to my front door. My keys jangled in my hand, but I paused. Claire's voice drifted through the window, which was cracked open despite the chill. She must have been pacing in the living room again. She always did that during her important calls. "No, you don't understand," she was saying, her tone sharp with frustration. "It's not that simple." I smiled despite myself. That was my Claire. Always fierce, always fighting for what she believed in. I'd raised her to be strong, to never back down. Perhaps I'd done too good a job. I was about to insert my key when her next words froze me in place. "I'm ashamed of her, okay? Is that what you want to hear? My mother is an embarrassment. The way she dresses, the way she talks, those ridiculous stories she tells about her hospital days. God, I wish she'd just disappear already." The grocery bag slipped from my fingers. The salmon hit the wooden porch with a wet thud, but I couldn't move to pick it up. My hand remained suspended in midair, key pointing at the lock like an accusation. "She's supposed to move in with me next month," Claire continued, and I could hear her heels clicking on the hardwood floor I'd helped her install just last year. I know. But what choice do I have? I can't exactly stick her in some home. People would talk, at least this way. I can control the situation, keep her away from my work events, my friends. Each word was a precisely aimed arrow, finding its mark with devastating accuracy. I'd been shot before, not literally, though I'd certainly seen my share of violence in the emergency room. This was worse. This was my daughter, my only child, the person I'd built my entire existence around, discussing me like I was a problem to be managed, a shameful secret to be hidden. "I'm thinking about setting up a mother-in-law suite in the basement," she said. "That way, she'll have her own entrance. Won't have to parade her through the main house when people come over." The basement, where she stored Christmas decorations and old furniture she didn't want anymore. My knees trembled, and I carefully lowered myself to sit on the top step. The cold concrete seeped through my coat, the same coat I'd worn for 5 years because every extra dollar went to Claire's college fund, her car, her first apartment deposit. "Listen, I have to go," Claire said, her voice moving closer to the door. "My mother should be home soon. Gotta put on the loving daughter act, you know? Right, yeah, bye." I heard her footsteps retreating, probably heading to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of that expensive wine she liked, the kind that cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. I sat there as the sun began to set, painting the suburban street in shades of orange and pink. The salmon leaked through its paper wrapping, forming a small puddle on the porch. Somewhere down the street, children were laughing, probably playing one last game before dinner. Normal sounds of a normal evening, while my world quietly crumbled. When I finally stood, my joints protested, age and shock making me move like a woman decades older. I picked up the ruined groceries, walked back down the steps, and deposited them in the garbage can at the curb. Then I got in my car and drove away. I didn't knock. I didn't go inside. I couldn't face her. Couldn't pretend I hadn't heard. Couldn't sit across from her at dinner and smile while those words echoed in my head. I wish she'd just disappear. As I pulled into a motel parking lot 20 miles away, I made a decision. If my daughter wanted me to disappear, then that's exactly what I would do, but not in the way she expected, not quietly, not conveniently tucked away in her basement, no. My disappearance would be complete, and it would cost her everything she thought she was entitled to. That night in the motel room, with its faded floral bedspread and the persistent drip of a bathroom faucet, I let the memories flood back. They came in waves, each one carrying the weight of sacrifice that I'd convinced myself was love. Robert had been gone for 23 years. Heart attack at 48, leaving me with a mortgage, a 9-year-old daughter, and a nursing degree that suddenly needed to support us both. I remembered the night after his funeral, Claire crawling into my bed, her small body shaking with sobs. "Don't leave me too, Mommy," she'd whispered. I'd held her tight and promised I never would. I kept that promise. God, how I kept it. Double shifts became my normal. 16 hours on my feet, dealing with combative patients, bodily fluids, and the constant specter of death. I'd come home at 7 in the morning, make Claire breakfast, see her off to school, sleep for 4 hours, then get up to help with homework before heading back for the night shift. My feet developed permanent calluses. My back ached constantly, but Claire had her dance classes, her piano lessons, her private tutoring when math became a struggle. The first sign should have been her 13th birthday party. I'd worked overtime for months to afford the celebration she wanted. A pool party at the country club where her wealthy classmates belonged. I'd arrived straight from a particularly brutal shift, still smelling faintly of antiseptic despite my hurried cleanup. Claire had taken one look at me and steered me toward the back corner, away from the other parents. "Mom, could you just maybe sit over there?" she'd said, gesturing to a table partially hidden by a potted palm. "And please don't tell any of your hospital stories. These people don't want to hear about blood in bedpans." I'd laughed it off then. Teenagers, right? They're all embarrassed by their parents. But it continued. Parent-teacher conferences where she'd insist on going alone. School plays where she'd tell me the wrong time so I'd arrive after the lights dimmed. The graduation dinner where she'd introduced me to her boyfriend's parents as Margaret, not my mother, until his confused expression forced her to clarify. "She's just going through a phase," my sister had said when I'd confided in her. "She'll appreciate you when she's older." I believed it. I had to. What else did I have? When Claire got into Columbia, I'd cried with joy. My brilliant girl, heading to an Ivy League school. The tuition nearly killed me. I sold my car, took out loans, picked up private duty nursing jobs on top of my hospital shifts. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more nights than I could count while she dined in Manhattan restaurants on my credit card. The worst part? I enabled it all. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of disrespect, I absorbed it like a sponge, telling myself it was just temporary. She was stressed about school. She was finding herself. She was building a life. I remember the day she graduated from law school. I'd driven 12 hours straight because I couldn't afford to miss work and fly. I arrived wrinkled and exhausted, clutching the bouquet of roses I'd bought from a gas station because all the florist shops were closed. She'd taken one look at me in the lobby of that grand auditorium, and her face had twisted with something I recognize now as disgust. "Mom, I told you to wear the blue dress," she'd hissed. "This is my blue dress. Honey, that's navy, and it's from the 90s? God, why didn't you just order something online like I told you? Because your student loans ate my clothing budget for the next decade." I'd thought, but didn't say. She'd walked 5 feet ahead of me the entire day, only acknowledging my presence when her professors asked about family. Even then, the introduction was brief, perfunctory. "This is my mother. She's a nurse." Said like it was something shameful, something less than, but still, I made excuses. She was launching her career. She was under pressure. She'd come around, the house, My $2 million house that was supposed to be my legacy to her. Robert and I had bought it for $60,000 in the 80s, a fixer-upper in what was then a questionable neighborhood. Over the years, as the area gentrified and tech money flooded in, its value had skyrocketed. I'd maintained it meticulously, even when it meant fixing the roof myself or learning plumbing from YouTube videos because I couldn't afford professionals. You could sell it, Claire had suggested last Christmas, eyeing the peeling paint on the shutters with disdain. Move into something smaller, more manageable. This is your childhood home, I'd reminded her. She'd shrugged. I haven't lived here in 15 years. Mom, it's just a house. Just a house. Just like I was just an embarrassment, I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the flood of memories. 23 years of single motherhood, 23 years of putting her needs before mine, her dreams before my health, her comfort before my dignity. And what did I have to show for it? A daughter who was ashamed of me, who wanted me to disappear. The motel room's digital clock glowed 3:27 a.m. in the darkness. Somewhere in my house, her house. She'd probably already started thinking of it that way. Claire was probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that her wish was already coming true. I was disappearing. But I'd be damned if I'd do it on her terms. The next morning, I sat in my car outside First National Bank, waiting for them to open. I'd parked across the street, watching the early morning joggers and dog walkers pass by, living their normal lives while mine pivoted on its axis. The bank manager, Thomas, knew me well. I'd been a customer for 35 years. He'd helped me through Robert's death, the refinancing during tough times, the careful investment of my meager savings. Margaret, he said warmly when I walked in at 9:01 a.m. sharp. What brings you in so early? I need to access my safety deposit box, I said, and I have some questions about selling property. In the privacy of the small viewing room, I opened the metal box I'd paid for religiously all these years. Inside were the documents that represented my entire life. Robert's death certificate, Claire's birth certificate, our marriage license, and most importantly, the deed to the house. Free and clear, no mortgage, no liens, just my name, Margaret Ann Walker as sole owner. I stared at the paper, thinking about how many times I'd almost put Claire's name on it too. She'd suggested it last year for tax purposes, but something had held me back. Mother's intuition, perhaps, or maybe just the last shred of self-preservation I had left, back in Thomas's office. I laid out my requirements. Quick sale, cash deal if possible, closing as soon as legally allowable. He raised his eyebrows, but didn't question my urgency. The market's hot right now, he said, fingers flying over his keyboard. A house in your neighborhood, that size. Margaret, you're sitting on a gold mine. Recent comparables are going for 2.3, 2.4 million. I'll take 2 million flat for a quick, clean sale, I said. He leaned back in his chair. May I ask why the hurry? Life changes, I said simply. I need to make some of my own. He recommended a real estate attorney and a reputable agent who specialized in quick transactions. By noon, I was sitting in a gleaming office downtown, signing papers to list my house. We can probably have this sold within the week. The agent, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia, assured me, cash buyers from tech are always looking in your neighborhood. Some of them make offers sight unseen. Perfect, I said. Will you need time to pack, move out your belongings? I thought about the house, filled with furniture I'd carefully maintained, photos on every wall, Claire's childhood artwork still hanging in the hallway because I couldn't bear to take it down. 23 years of memories soaked into every surface. I'll take what I need, I said. The rest can stay. Price it as partially furnished if that helps. Patricia's eyes lit up. That'll make it even more attractive. Where will you be moving to? I haven't decided yet, I said truthfully. That afternoon, I returned to the house while Claire was at work. I moved methodically, like I was prepping for surgery. Only the essentials, some clothes, my jewelry box with Robert's wedding ring and my mother's pearls, a photo album from before Claire was born, my nursing diplomas and licenses. Everything fit into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. I paused in Claire's childhood room. Now her home office. The walls still held the pale pink paint she'd chosen at 7, though she'd been lobbying me to update it, something more sophisticated. Her law degree hung where her horse posters used to be. I touched the frame gently, remembering the pride I'd felt watching her receive it, even as she'd cringed at my gas station roses. My phone buzzed. Claire texting from work. Don't forget, dinner Sunday with the Weatherbys. Wear something nice. And please don't mention you're voting for Biden. I stared at the message, then deleted it. Deleted her entire text thread. Hundreds of messages, mostly her telling me what to do, what to wear, what not to say. The last message I'd sent her was 2 days ago. Love you, sweetheart, have a good day. Left on read, as usual. By Thursday evening, Patricia called with good news. Full cash offer, $2.1 million. They want to close by next Friday. Can you make that work? Yes, I said without hesitation. The buyers are willing to keep everything as is. They apparently fell in love with the, quote, authentic period details and lived-in charm. I almost laughed. The authentic period details Claire constantly complained about, the lived-in charm she found embarrassing. That night, I sat in my motel room with a legal pad, doing calculations. After taxes and fees, I'd have enough to disappear properly, not to some basement apartment where I'd be hidden away like a shameful secret, but to somewhere I could breathe, somewhere I could just be Margaret, not someone's embarrassment. I picked up the pen and wrote a single word at the top of the page. Freedom. For the first time in 23 years, I was choosing myself. And if that meant becoming the villain in Claire's story, so be it. I'd been the martyr long enough. The morning of closing day. I walked through my empty house one last time. The movers had come yesterday, not for me, but for the staging company the buyers hired. They'd whisked away my worn furniture, my hand-sewn curtains, my lifetime of careful accumulation, replacing them with sleek, modern pieces that made the house look like a magazine spread. Claire would have loved it. I stood in the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, my footsteps echoing on the tile I'd scrubbed until my knuckles bled. The refrigerator hummed, the same one I'd bought secondhand and kept running with YouTube repair videos and sheer determination. On the counter sat the one thing I needed to leave behind, a single sheet of paper and the house key. I'd written and rewritten the note a dozen times, long versions full of hurt and recrimination, angry versions that cataloged every sacrifice, every slight, pleading versions that begged for understanding. In the end, I chose simplicity. I picked up the pen one final time and wrote in my careful nurse's handwriting, Claire, the mother you're ashamed of has disappeared. As you wished. I heard you on the phone. Every word. I'm choosing to leave, not in shame, but with dignity. The house is sold. The money is mine. I worked for it, bled for it, gave up my health and dreams for it. You wanted me gone. You've gotten your wish. Don't look for me. Margaret. I set the key on top of the note. The metal clicking against the granite countertop Claire had always said was too dated. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. In the hospital, during the worst traumas, my hands never shook either. Training, perhaps, or maybe some pain is so deep it bypasses the nervous system entirely. The closing was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. By 1:45, I was sitting in the attorney's office, signing my name with swift, sure strokes. The buyers, a young couple from Silicon Valley, gushed about the house's authentic character and perfect bones. They promised to preserve its charm. We just love the stories these old houses tell, the wife said, her eyes bright with excitement. I smiled politely, thinking of all the stories they'd never know. The bathroom where I'd taught Claire to braid her hair, the back door frame where I'd marked her height every birthday until she told me to stop because it was childish. The living room where I'd slept on the couch for 6 months so she could have my bedroom when hers flooded and I couldn't afford immediate repairs. It's been a good house, I said simply. When the wire transfer confirmed $1,987,345 after all fees and taxes, I felt something shift in my chest. Not my heart, exactly. More like tectonic plates realigning after decades of pressure. Congratulations, the the attorney said, shaking my hand. "What's next for you, Mrs. Walker?" "I haven't decided yet." I said. It was the truth. For the first time in my adult life, I had no plan beyond the next moment, no shifts to work, no tuition to pay, no one else's needs to consider. I drove to the bank and had Thomas split the money into several accounts, keeping one accessible for immediate needs. He didn't ask questions, just helped me set up everything securely. Then I drove to the motel, packed my 2 suitcases and 1 box into my car, and sat behind the wheel. My phone buzzed. "Claire again. Where are you? I came by for lunch and you're not home. Also, did you change the locks? My key doesn't work." I turned the phone off without responding and tossed it into the glove compartment. She'd figure it out soon enough. The new owners would arrive Monday to start their renovations. Someone, a neighbor probably, would tell her about the sale. She'd find the note, and then she'd understand that when you wish for someone to disappear, you should be careful what you wish for. I pulled out of the motel parking lot and headed toward the interstate. South, I decided, somewhere warm, somewhere I'd never have to apologize for my secondhand clothes or my working-class roots or the way I pronounce certain words. Somewhere I could sit by the ocean and remember who I was before I became someone to be ashamed of. As I merged onto I-95, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me had tired eyes and deep lines, but there was something else there too. Not quite a smile, but close. For 23 years, I'd been disappearing slowly, piece by piece, sacrificing chunks of myself to build my daughter's life. Now I was disappearing all at once, but on my own terms. The difference was everything. I pressed the accelerator and didn't look back. The mother Claire was ashamed of was gone. What remained was just Margaret, and for the first time in decades. That felt like enough. 3 days later, I was sitting in a small cafe in Savannah, Georgia. When my phone finally died, I turned it on briefly each morning, watching the missed calls and messages pile up. Claire. 47 calls, 63 texts, 18 voicemails. I didn't listen to any of them. I knew the progression without hearing her voice. Confusion, anger, panic, desperation. The same emotional trajectory I'd gone through. Except hers was compressed into days instead of decades. I ordered another coffee and opened my laptop. Curious, despite myself. Claire had always been resourceful. She'd find out what happened soon enough. Her Facebook page told the story, the first post. From Saturday. Has anyone seen my mother? She's not answering her phone. Concerned comments from her friends. Suggestions to call the police. Sunday. Update, the house has been sold. I don't understand what's happening. The tone shifting from worry to indignation. Monday brought the explosion. I can't believe this. She sold my childhood home without telling me. $2 million and she just disappeared. This is insane. If anyone knows where Margaret Walker is, please message me immediately. The comments were what interested me most. Her friends, those polished professionals she was so eager to impress, weren't offering the sympathy she expected. Claire, didn't you always complain about her? Wrote someone named Jessica. Wait, your childhood home? Wasn't it in her name? From a law school classmate? Maybe she needed a change. You did say you wanted her to move somewhere smaller, added another. But the devastating blow came from her Aunt Patricia, my sister, who'd finally had enough. Claire, everyone in the family has watched how you've treated your mother for years. We've all seen you roll your eyes at her stories, criticize her clothes, hide her from your fancy friends. You literally told me at Christmas that you wish she'd disappear and stop embarrassing you. Well, congratulations. You got your wish. The comment had 87 likes. Claire's response was desperate. That's not what I meant. She's my mother. She can't just leave. Patricia's reply was ice cold. She's a human being, not your personal doormat. And yes, she absolutely can leave. I closed the laptop, my coffee growing cold. Outside the cafe window, tourists wandered by, couples holding hands, families with children, normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small drama playing out in my former world. My new phone, a simple prepaid I'd bought with cash, buzzed with a text from Thomas at the bank. He was forwarding a message from Claire, who'd apparently figured out he might know something. I read it once, then deleted it. She was threatening legal action, claiming elder abuse, demanding the house sale be reversed. Thomas had responded professionally, reminding her that I was of sound mind and had every legal right to sell my own property. She's hired a lawyer, Thomas warned in his text. But don't worry, everything was done properly. You're in the clear. A lawyer. Of course. When emotional manipulation failed, Claire defaulted to legal threats. I wondered if she saw the irony, using the education I'd paid for to try to claw back the money I'd earned. That evening, I found a small apartment to rent month to month near Tybee Island. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, outdated appliances, windows that stuck, but it had a view of the marsh, and if I stood on the narrow balcony and craned my neck, I could see a sliver of ocean. The landlord, a weathered woman named Ruth, didn't ask many questions beyond confirming I could pay the rent. "Running from something?" she asked as I signed the lease. "Running to something," I corrected. She nodded like that made perfect sense. I spent the next days establishing a routine. Morning walks on the beach before the tourists arrived. Coffee at the same cafe where the barista was learning my name. Afternoons reading books I'd bought but never had time to open. Evenings watching the sunset paint the marsh grass gold. My sister called the burner phone on day 5. I'd given her the number in case of a real emergency. "She's losing it, Maggie," Patricia said without preamble. Calling everyone, showing up at places she thinks you might be. She even went to the hospital and demanded your personnel records. They didn't give them to her? Of course not. HIPAA exists for a reason, but Margaret, she's telling people you have dementia, that you're not in your right mind. I laughed, actually laughed. Of course she is. If I'm senile, she might have a shot at the money. It's not funny. She's making a fool of herself. Jennifer from her firm called me. Apparently, Claire's been missing work, showing up disheveled. They're concerned. "Still not my problem," I said, meaning it. Patricia sighed. "I know. I'm proud of you, for finally choosing yourself. But I'm also sad it came to this. It was always going to come to this," I said quietly. "I just should have done it sooner." After we hung up, I walked to the beach. The sun was setting, turning the ocean into molten copper. A family nearby was packing up their beach toys, the children protesting leaving. The mother looked exhausted but patient, promising they'd come back tomorrow. I thought about Claire at that age, how she'd cling to my hand at the beach, terrified of the waves but fascinated by them too. "Don't let go. Mommy," she'd plead, and I never did. Until now. My phone buzzed with another forwarded message, this time from a cousin. Claire had posted a long, rambling Facebook post about abandonment and betrayal, about the sacred bond between mother and child. The comments were brutal. People were sharing their own stories of toxic family relationships, congratulating those who'd walked away. Claire's victim narrative was crumbling in real time. She made her bed. One commenter wrote, "Now she's mad she has to lie in it." I turned off the phone and faced the ocean. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a job, something part-time, just enough to stay busy. Maybe at a clinic, where I could still help people but on my own terms, or perhaps something completely different. A bookstore? A flower shop? The choice was mine. For the first time in 23 years, everything was... 6 months passed like pages turning in a book I was finally writing for myself. My apartment near Tybee Island became a sanctuary. I painted the walls a soft seafoam green, something Claire would have called dated, but that reminded me of healing. I bought furniture from secondhand stores, each piece chosen because I liked it, not because it would impress anyone. A rocking chair by the window, a bookshelf that leaned slightly to the left, a kitchen table just big enough for one. My days developed a rhythm that belonged entirely to me. I woke at 5:30 a.m., by choice now, not necessity. My walks on the beach stretched longer as my body remembered what it felt like to move without exhaustion. The constant ache in my lower back, my companion for 20 years, faded to an occasional twinge. I gained 10 pounds and felt healthier than I had in decades. I found work at a small used bookstore 3 days a week. The owner, Marcus, was a retired professor who needed help with inventory and didn't care about my employment gap. The pay was modest, but I didn't need much. My customers were locals mostly, people who called me Miss Margaret and recommended romance novels with knowing winks. In the evenings, I wrote in a journal, documenting not the past but the present. Small observations, the way Spanish moss moved like ghost hair in the wind, how the marsh smelled different at high tide versus low, the particular shade of pink the sky turned just before a storm. I was learning to see beauty without needing to share it, to exist without being useful to someone else. Patricia visited once, in November. She sat on my narrow balcony, drinking sweet tea and shaking her head. "You look 10 years younger," she said. "I feel 30 years younger." I admitted. She caught me up on family news, carefully skirting around Claire until I asked directly, "How is she?" Patricia sighed. "Surviving. She kept the apartment, but she's had to take on more cases to afford it without the house to fall back on. The Weatherbys don't invite her to dinner anymore. Apparently, she had some kind of breakdown at their Labor Day party. Started crying about being abandoned. Made everyone uncomfortable." I felt a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, not quite pity. And otherwise? "She's in therapy. Finally, doctor. Morrison, you remember him from the hospital? His wife is a psychiatrist. Claire's been seeing her twice a week." "Good," I said, meaning it. Perhaps she'd finally confront the person she'd become, though I doubted it. Self-reflection had never been Claire's strong suit. "She's still looking for you," Patricia added quietly. "Hired a private investigator last month. He won't find me." I said, "I'd been careful. Cash transactions, no social media, a different last name on the lease." Margaret Walker had truly disappeared. Margaret Fisher, my mother's maiden name, had taken her place. "Do you ever think about reaching out?" Patricia asked. "No," I said without hesitation. "She wanted me gone. I'm gone. That story is over." Winter came gently to coastal Georgia. I bought a light jacket from the thrift store and learned to love the quiet season when tourists fled north. The beach belonged to locals then, dog walkers and shell collectors, and other refugees from former lives. I made friends with a group of women who met for coffee every Wednesday. Former teachers, nurses, one ex-lawyer who'd burned out defending corporate criminals. We called ourselves the Wednesday Widows, though not all of us had lost husbands. Some had lost themselves and were slowly excavating who they used to be. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 10 years, shared Ellen, the ex-lawyer. One gray morning, I chose my career over her school plays, her broken hearts, her needs. By the time I realized what I'd missed, she'd built a life without me. Sent me a letter saying I'd taught her how to be alone, so she was returning the favor." "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Every day," she said. "But I also understand it. Some bridges, once burned, light the way forward for someone else." I thought about that often. Claire had burned our bridge with her words, her shame, her casual cruelty, but the fire had illuminated an escape route I'd been too afraid to see. One evening in February, I was closing up the bookstore when a young woman came in, frantic. She needed a gift for her mother's birthday, tomorrow, and everything else was closed. "What is she like?" I asked. I don't know," she admitted, tears threatening. "We haven't been close. I've been awful to her, taking her for granted. But I want to try to fix things." I studied her, maybe 25, polished in a way that spoke of ambition over warmth, nothing like Claire in appearance. But something in her desperation felt familiar. "Sometimes," I said carefully, pulling a book from the poetry section, "the best gift is simply showing up. But if you need something tangible, Mary Oliver always helps. Her poems are about paying attention, about gratitude, things mothers understand." She bought the book and a card, thanking me profusely. As she left, she turned back. Did your kids ever take you for granted?" "Yes," I said simply. "But that's not your story. You're here. You're trying. That matters." She smiled and disappeared into the night. I locked up and walked home along the beach, phosphorescence glowing in the waves like scattered stars. I wondered if Claire would ever stand in a bookstore, desperate to bridge the gap she'd created. Probably not. She'd inherited her father's pride along with his eyes, but that was no longer my concern. I had my books, my beach walks, my Wednesday widows. I had silence that felt like peace instead of loneliness. I had Margaret Fisher's life to live, and it was enough. More than enough. It was mine. It was a Thursday evening in March when I saw her. I was sitting on a driftwood log, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of apricot and lavender. The beach was nearly empty, just a few joggers and an elderly man throwing tennis balls for his retriever. I'd been writing in my journal, trying to capture the way the wind made patterns in the sand, when movement in my peripheral vision made me look up. Claire stood 50 feet away, silhouetted against the dying light. Even from that distance, I could see how she'd changed. Her usually perfect hair hung limp, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a wrinkled sweater. She was thinner, her shoulders curved inward like she was protecting herself from a blow. She hadn't seen me yet. She was scanning the beach, methodical and desperate. The private investigator had done his job after all. Or perhaps Patricia had finally cracked. It didn't matter. She was here. I closed my journal quietly and waited. When her eyes finally found me, she froze. For a long moment, we just looked at each other across the sand. Then she started walking toward me, stumbling slightly in her inappropriate heels. I didn't move, didn't stand to greet her or walk away. I simply sat, hands folded in my lap, and watched my daughter approach like a stranger. She stopped 10 feet away, as if there was an invisible barrier she couldn't cross. Up close, I could see the damage more clearly. Dark circles under her eyes, bitten nails, something she'd never allowed herself before. A tremor in her hands that spoke of too much coffee or too little sleep. "Mom," she said, and her voice cracked on the word. I nodded, but didn't speak. The sound of the waves filled the silence between us. "I've been looking for you for months," she continued. "The investigator tracked your credit card to Savannah, but then the trail went cold. I've been driving up and down the coast every weekend, checking beaches, bookstores, places I thought you might—" She trailed off, perhaps realizing she didn't actually know what places I might frequent. We'd been strangers long before I disappeared. "I found your note," she said unnecessarily. "I know you heard me on the phone." "Yes," I said. My first word to her in 8 months. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I didn't mean it. I was just stressed. You know how I get when I'm stressed. "I know exactly how you get," I agreed calmly. "You get cruel, you get ashamed, you wish for people to disappear. That's not fair, isn't it?" I interrupted. "Tell me, Claire, when was the last time you introduced me to someone without apologizing for me afterward? When did you last visit without giving me a list of things to change? When did you ever, even once, say you were proud of me?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I was proud. You just couldn't show it. Couldn't risk your image being tainted by association with your working-class mother. I understand. You made that very clear." She was crying now, mascara running in dark streams. "Please, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I understand now how horrible I was. Please come home." "Home?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I am home. Claire, this is my home now. Your home is with me," she insisted. "I need you. I don't know how to do this without you." "Do what without me?" "Everything," the word exploded from her. "I don't know how to be a person without you to push against, without you to blame, without me to use," I finished. "Without me to sacrifice for you while you pretend my sacrifices were worthless." She sank to her knees in the sand. Designer jeans be damned. "I'll change. I'll do better. I'll introduce you to everyone as my mother who worked herself to the bone for me. I'll tell them about the double shifts, the loans you took out, everything you gave up. Please." I studied her, this daughter I'd loved more than my own life. Even now, broken and begging, there was calculation in her eyes. She was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. performing contrition like she'd performed everything else in her life. "No," I said simply. "No?" She looked stunned. "But I'm apologizing. I'm here. I found you. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you want your safety net back, your basement backup plan, your free childcare for the children you'll have someday and raised to be just as ashamed of their grandmother as you were." "That's not true, isn't it? Tell me. Claire, if I came back, would you really parade me in front of the Weatherbys? Would you truly be proud to introduce me to your colleagues as your mother, the retired nurse? Or would you just hide your shame better? Save it for behind closed doors?" She couldn't answer. We both knew the truth. I stood, brushing sand from my pants. "I forgive you," I said, and meant it. Not for your sake, but for mine. I forgive you for being exactly who I raised you to be, someone who valued image over substance, success over kindness. That's my failure as much as yours. So you'll come back? Hope flared in her eyes. "No, I forgive you, but I don't forget, and I won't put myself back in a position to be hurt by you again. Love without respect is poison. Claire, I finally stopped drinking it." I leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, tasting salt from her tears. She grabbed at my hands, but I pulled away. "Mom, please. Goodbye, Claire. Have a good life. I hope you find whatever it is you're actually looking for." I turned and walked away, my footsteps steady in the soft sand behind me. I heard her calling, begging, sobbing, but I didn't look back. I'd learned that from her, how to walk away from someone who claimed to need you while being ashamed of your existence. The sun had set completely by the time I reached my apartment. The moon was rising, full and silver, turning the marsh into a landscape of shadows and light. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my balcony, journal open in my lap. But I didn't write about Claire. I wrote about the moon, the way it made everything look like a dream. I wrote about tomorrow's plans, inventory at the bookstore, coffee with the Wednesday widows, maybe trying that new recipe for shrimp and grits. I wrote about my life, the one I'd chosen, the one where I was nobody's shame, nobody's embarrassment, nobody's backup plan. Just Margaret, sitting by the sea, finally and completely free. The next morning, I woke to find a note slipped under my door, Claire's handwriting, desperate and rushed. "Mom, I'm staying at the Seabreeze Motel, room 12. Please, just one more chance. I'll wait as long as it takes." I crumpled the paper and dropped it in the trash. Then I went about my day, shower, coffee, beach walk, but something felt different. The encounter had shifted something in the air, like the pressure change before a storm. At the bookstore, Marcus noticed my distraction. "You okay, Margaret? You seem a million miles away." "Just ghosts," I said, which was true enough. "That evening, Patricia called. She found you." "Yes." And nothing. She said her piece. I said mine. It's done. She's not giving up, Maggie. She's been posting all over Facebook about finding you, about how you rejected her apology. She's making you sound, "I don't care," I interrupted. "Let her tell whatever story she needs. I'm done being a character in her narrative." But Claire wasn't done. Over the next 3 days, she appeared everywhere. Outside the bookstore, at my coffee shop, walking the beach at dawn, never approaching, just watching, waiting. A ghost haunting my new life. On the 4th day, I'd had enough. I found her sitting on the same driftwood log where we'd met, staring at the ocean with hollow eyes. "This is harassment," I said without preamble. She looked up, hope flickering. "You came to tell you to leave. I have a life here. Claire, a peaceful life. You don't get to destroy this, too. I sold my apartment," she said suddenly. "Use the money to take a sabbatical from work. I have nowhere else to go." "That's not my problem." "I know." She laughed bitterly. "God, I know, nothing is your problem anymore. I made sure of that, didn't I? Pushed and pushed until you had no choice but to save yourself." I said nothing. The truth didn't need my confirmation. Doctor, Morrison's wife, my therapist, she says I have a narcissistic wound, that I can't handle anyone existing outside my control, especially not you. She says I turned you into an extension of myself instead of seeing you as a person. And when you didn't perform the role I assigned, I punished you with shame. Sounds like a good therapist. She is. She also says I'll probably never fully heal from this, that the best I can do is learn to live with the consequences of my choices. Learn to respect boundaries, even when they hurt. I watched a pelican dive into the waves, emerging with a silver fish in its beak. Nature's simple transactions. Hunt, catch, survive. No guilt, no manipulation, no emotional blackmail. So what do you want from me, Claire? She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, nothing, that's what I came to say, that I want nothing from you anymore. No forgiveness, no relationship, no pretending we can fix this. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. You didn't abandon me. You escaped me. And you had every right to. I studied her face, searching for the angle, the manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine acceptance. I'm going back to New York tomorrow, she continued. I'll find a smaller place, rebuild my practice, maybe try to be a better person, though I'm not sure I know how, but I won't bother you again. You've earned your peace. She stood, brushing sand from her jeans. For a moment, I saw her as she'd been at 5, gap-toothed and giggling, reaching for my hand at this very beach, but that child was gone. Had been gone for years before I'd finally accepted it. Goodbye, Mom, she said. Thank you for everything, even if I was too broken to see it. She walked away, and this time, I was the one watching a figure disappear down the beach. I felt no urge to call her back, no last-minute surge of maternal instinct, just a quiet sadness for what had never really been. I stayed on the log until the stars came out, then walked home to my little apartment, on my balcony. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today my daughter left for good, not in anger this time, but in understanding." Perhaps that's the best ending we could hope for. Not reconciliation, but recognition. She sees me now, finally, as a person who exists beyond her needs, and I see her as someone who might, perhaps, learn to be better to the next person who loves her. The moon is new tonight, a barely visible sliver. Tomorrow it will grow, and so will I. Still becoming Margaret, still discovering who she is when she's not disappearing into someone else's shadow. The waves sound like forgiveness, or maybe that's just the sound of moving on. I closed the journal and went inside. Tomorrow I had inventory at the bookstore, lunch with the Wednesday widows, a life to live. My phone, my real phone now, not the burner, buzzed with a message from Patricia. She's gone. You okay? I'm good, I texted back, and for the first time in my entire life, it was completely true. I was good, I was free, I was finally, fully, unapologetically myself, and that was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect with listeners around the world. If this story touched you, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts. Your stories and perspectives make our community richer. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing yourself.